So, hello, welcome. This is Joe Tumalo and
David Toll.
David Toll. How's that for a formal introduction?
There we go.
So, it is February of 2020, and there's something that was just released, established, called the Secure Act.
Yes.
What would you say? Released, established,
Well,
instituted?
it was a law that was just passed.
Law that was passed, Secure Act. And there's some important things that we all should be aware of when we're interacting with donors.
So there were really two big areas that impact charities. One is the qualified charitable distribution. So we remember that everybody that reaches 70 and a half under the old law had to start making mandatory distributions. What happened with the Secure Act is they increased that age to 72. So they say you no longer have to make your mandatory distributions at 70 and a half. We're going to do it at 72. The purpose is to have people save more in that little period of time. Individuals are getting older, and as you get older, you're going to need the money longer. So if you started a little later, you don't tend to run out, sooner, is the concept. When they passed that provision, one of the things they didn't do, though, is increase the ability to give that charitable qualified distribution to the charity. They didn't move that to 72. They kept that at 70 and a half. So there's a little confusion as to what that really means. So let's start with when do you have to make that required mandatory distribution. So if you're 70 and a half in 2019 and you started making that mandatory distribution, even though you're not going to turn 72 in 2020, you still have to make your mandatory distribution.
So once you start, you can't go back.
Had you started,
right.
You can't go back. You have to make the mandatory distribution this year and then again next year, even though you're not 72 quite yet. Mm-hmm. If you haven't turned 72 yet, so you're 70 and you would have turned 70 and a half this year, you now wait till you're 72 to make the required distribution. However, you can still make a qualified charitable distribution at 70 and a half, regardless of whether you're 72 or not. So those that are 70 and a half and still required to make that distribution, it makes sense for them to make the qualified charitable distribution. The question is, why would you want to make a qualified distribution at 72 or 71 if you haven't hit, I said 72, I meant 70 and a half or 71 if you're not quite 72 yet and you're required to do it at 72. Well, the purpose is to try and get some of that money out of your IRA. A lot of individuals have what we call bloated IRAs. They've rolled over their 401ks. They have more money than they need to live on, and they know they have more money than they need to live on for the rest of their life.
We call that a first world problem.
It is a problem. I wish I had that problem.
Bloated
IRAs.
I have other things bloated, but not my
So for those that are in that situation, even though you're not 72, you can still take out $100,000, up to $100,000 a year from your IRA and roll it to the charity. You would do it the same way, i.e. you'd contact your administrator, take the funds directly from the IRA and roll it directly to the charity. You don't touch it because if you touch it, you need to pay taxes on it. You do that to try and reduce the amount that you have in the IRA, so when you do have to take the mandatory distributions, in theory, it reduces the amount over the next few years. So between 70 and a half and 72, if you're not required, that might be a reason to talk to somebody to take it out if they feel that they have a bloated. Now, most people don't. I mean, the reality is, I don't think they're going to see a lot of qualified distributions from individuals that are between that 70 and a half and 72. They're going to wait till 72. The other reason we do this, the qualified distributions, is when they increase the standard deductions limits to $24,000 or $24,500, I believe, this year. I may be a little off on that, kind of spaced on the number. Mm-hmm. Most individuals, when you're retired, no longer have mortgage expenses, no longer have massive amounts of taxes, so they never meet that standard deduction, which means making a charitable contribution doesn't really get you the deduction that we always talk about. So by taking the money from the IRA directly to the charity, it never comes into your income. Therefore, you're not paying taxes on it. You don't get a charitable deduction, but you don't pay the income. You also don't have it increase what's called your Medicare surcharge tax, because the more income you make, the higher that tax goes. There's individuals on Social Security, and the more income you make above Social Security, you start having to pay income taxes on Social Security. So if you can reduce some of that and still live okay, it makes a lot of sense to do the qualified distribution. But just keep in mind that it's now going to be 72 your target audience, not so much 70 and a half as it was in the past.
And the point at which the donor needs to take the distribution correct me if I'm wrong, for the first time they take it, now when they turn 72, they have till April 1st of the following calendar year.
Correct.
If they've already been taking it, if it's not their first time, it's December 31st of that year.
Of the current calendar. Correct.
Right.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So there is some timing issues with that. And as always, if your donor is interested in making the qualified distribution, you want to make sure they try and do it by the middle of December, or even the beginning of December, because at the end of December, a lot of the providers don't have the capacity or won't make that distribution. They'll make it directly to you and not a qualified charity. So it's smart to do it early. There's a second area that's impacted or that's interesting. With an IRA under the old law, when an individual passed away and named an individual, and let's forget the spouse because this does not apply to the spouse, named an individual, say your children, your grandchildren, or whoever it is, they could tag on and basically what's called stretch the payments out. Why is that important? Well, you have the option of either taking a lump sum amount out or stretching. Now remember, if money that's going into an IRA or into your 401k, you've never paid taxes on it. So when that money comes out, somebody has to pay the income taxes on it. We're not even talking about estate taxes. This is pure income tax with the rates above 30%. So think if you pass away and you have $1 million in your IRA, and that was left to your children, and you have two, all of a sudden, if they took it out and required to take it out, that's $500,000, this year that they get on top of the money that they're making. Their tax rate goes up, et cetera, et cetera. And if you're like me, I have 4 children. If you have children, I don't think I want my children to have $500,000 at their ages, 22 to 31. I don't think they're responsible enough. I want to be able to stretch that out. So under the old rule, you could stretch that out. And you could stretch it out basically over their lifetime. There was all kinds of measurement tests, but essentially it became over their lifetime that they could take it. So if you have $500,000, you've got a 30-year-old that has 40, 50 years left to live, 60 years to live. Stretching it out over 60 years obviously is a little less each year, and therefore it lowers the tax burden. They get more money at the end. The new law, effective as of January 1st, requires all the funds to come out in 10 years. There is no more requirement that you have to make annual payments. The rule now is at the end of 10 years, regardless of whether you've taken money out or not, boom, it all has to come out in 10 years. So either you can stretch it over the 10-year period, so that $500,000 over 10 years now becomes, I guess, $50,000 a year for 10 years. And again, I'm not sure that I want my children to get that, or people to get that. And again, $50,000 may impact their taxes much higher than you want it to be. So instead of stretching it out over 50 years or 60 years or 40 years or whatever is left under the tests that were applicable, it's got to come out in 10 years. That presents a problem for a lot of individuals. So now, from a charitable point, how can we help that? So here's a problem. How can we help? So one of the things that we can look at or talk to our clients or donors about is taking and setting up a charitable remainder trust. Mm-hmm. And then having the beneficiary of the IRA, the charitable remainder trust. So the funds go into the charitable remainder trust. It goes in there at 100% because there's no taxes paid. Trust is treated like a charity. And then what happens is you stretch it over the life of the recipient, and now it kind of takes the sums out a little bit at a time over the life. They're getting a little less money. The money's growing as it's going. And then when whoever the last beneficiary of that trust dies, then the charity receives the money. So it's a solution to a potential problem that individuals may face. So those are the two areas that we really want to look at. There's a lot of other things that the Secure Act did that your clients may ask about, but I don't think this is the video. This is the time to get into it. I think that's something that if you want to learn more about it, you can contact us, and we'd be more than happy to talk about some of the other provisions that your clients might be worried about, but really don't impact the charities all that much.
We're not giving that away for free, right?
So that is the impact of the Secure Act.
And we do have an article that you wrote so eloquently.
Thank you.
That they can get.
Yes. On
our website. Right, and just go to giftplanningdevelopment.com/Secure Act.
Good.
Great.
So that's it on the Secure Act for today. I'm David Toll.
I'm Joe Tumalo.